Hi, this is MLS Benis Amel, and today we'll focus our discussion on what information we can obtain from the clinical lab data. Now, when we consider some data that we have in the lab, we realize that we have data on test results, that's the full blood count, the chemistries, the urines, and the rest. We also have data on the revenue that we generate, or these are some data that we can capture in the lab. We can capture the data from the supplies that we receive. We can capture data on the items that we have and store it as our inventory, data on quality control, quality assessment, maintenance of equipment, safety, and even the human resource, and a lot more which are not stated here. When we consider these data that we have at the lab and the kind of analysis we can make on them, we can basically make a descriptive analysis and look at basically what is happening in the lab. We can also, when it comes to data analysis, we can also consider why this is happening. For instance, after identifying what is happening in the lab, you can probe further to analyze the data further to understand why that observation is happening. We can also do predictive data analysis to identify certain things that will happen based on current trends. And then we can also make prescriptive analytics, where we can prescribe what could happen in the future. So, to bring us all to the right perspective and set us on course for analysis using this data statistical software, I just want to bring to our attention that, as stated earlier, you can obtain revenue analysis. You can make analysis on revenue. You can determine the trends. You can determine the disease prevalence or the distribution of diseases, or let's say some lab test, let's say full blood count. You can look at the distribution among the ages. You can look at your turnaround time, customer satisfaction, and many other things that you can look at with the lab data that you have. So, for instance, when we consider this chart, this pie chart is on the revenue generated in a lab, and you can see that the portion in red is talking about how much revenue is generated from the National Health Insurance Scheme, and the green portion is saying that about 23,500 revenue is paid in cash, and the remaining is from private insurance. So as a lab manager, if you have this information and you have to make a case, already you know how much you are generating. Let's say this data is for a month. It means that you are generating more than 100,000 Ghana cedis in a month. And I believe that this can solve the issue of delay with obtaining supplies from hospital managers on the grounds that labs do not generate enough money. We can also look at the trend. So this is a graph on the lab request, the total lab request of a hospital to the lab, and it's being compared between 2 years. So the blue line is 2022 and the orange line is 2023. And so this is giving a trend of what is happening over the period. So there is a slight increase from the beginning of the year in the total lab request until June, where it dropped. However, so far 2023 has not been able to pass the peak that was observed in the previous year. So as a lab manager, you can have a look at your lab request, the trend. If it's reducing, then you can investigate further, or even you take the observation in the month of June, you can probe further and find out why there was a sharp increase in 2022 and then it is not so in this year. Now you can also use your data to do analysis and find out some disease distributions or trends when it comes to some tests you have done at the lab. So if you look at the graph on the right, it is talking about some bacteria that have been isolated from a microbiology lab. And looking at the total culture from the table on the left, you realize that about 26 cases on culture and sensitivity was done in that particular month. And majority of the results came out as no bacterial growth, with a few isolates observed. So as lab scientists, aside generating results, we can investigate further, look at exactly what the data is looking like, and better advise our colleagues, or better advise clinicians and the entire hospital setting. This is also a graph on the turnaround time. So you look at the graph, and this is an investigation that was done over 2 different periods. So let's say, for instance, the first quarter of the year and the second quarter of the year. So that during the first quarter, they did the turnaround time analysis and realized that if someone comes in to do a test in the hematology lab, the average time spent is about 72 minutes. And so if you look at the chemistry lab, clients were waiting for about close to 2 hours, similar at the microbiology lab for people investigating on cerebrospinal fluid, and for antenatal cases they were waiting about 97 minutes. So probably the lab put in place measures to reduce the waiting time. So the dash in orange is the target that the lab set for themselves and put measures in place, and they were able to reduce the waiting time drastically for chemistry from 154, for instance, to 86 minutes. Similarly, they did that for the cerebrospinal fluid as well as for the pregnancy test. So if you're a lab manager and you are able to run some of these analyses, you're able to better put measures in place to improve your facility. Now, another thing we can obtain from our lab, and I will push that as lab scientists, we have a gold mine of data that we generate and store at the lab, and with the right ethical clearance, you can investigate these data further and even use them in clinical research and publication. So over the next or the subsequent courses, we'll be looking at practical courses or practical demonstration using data to analyze some of these data. So thank you very much, and let's meet in the next session.